Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/Simon Drew. I also do one-on-one mindset coaching, and you can book in your first free consultation by going to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching. On Facebook, you can join my group, the Practical Stoic Mastermind. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. And today's episode is really special. I'm so excited to share this amazing guest that we have for you today, and her name is Sharon Lebell. Now, for those of you who don't know Sharon Lebell, you probably do, but maybe it's just not really ringing a bell yet. Her book is called The Art of Living, and it's an interpretation of some of the choice passages from Epictetus's Enchiridion. And this book has just been so influential in my life, and I know that many of you will have read it as well, and it's been influential in your life. And, I was so grateful to have Sharon on the show, and I was grateful that she was able to give up her time for this. And I want to read something that she wrote about herself and about what she does, because I really think that this summarizes Sharon's career and what she loves in life. So she said this: "I write philosophical books and essays. My other career is performing on a supersized hammer dulcimer. My books and my music share a common purpose: to inspire readers and listeners to pay attention to the sweetness of life across joy and sorrow, triumph and failure, largesse and loss." And so that's Sharon for you. And, I'm so grateful because she very rarely has done interviews or appearances in media. And, she didn't have to do this, but because of our mutual backgrounds in music, she decided to give me a go. And we absolutely hit it off and had a great conversation that I know you guys are going to enjoy. And, she's just one of the most genuine people who I've ever met. And it was just such a pleasure. So, okay, I'm going to stop rambling on about how much I think of Sharon, because this was such a pleasure for me. But without any further ado, I present to you guys Sharon Lebell. Okay, so Sharon, obviously I've been extremely excited to have you on this podcast. Since I even started the podcast and started doing interviews, I've had people recommending that I have you on here. Your work has absolutely changed people's lives with how accessible you've made Stoicism in the art of living. So, I've already told the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and give us an introduction to the world of Sharon Lebell?
Okay. Well, in some ways, I'm the thing that academics love to hate. Namely, I'm a popularizer.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very comfortable with that label. It's self-attributed because I think it's very important that good ideas that can help other people on the ground, in our kitchens, in our real lives, not just from the neck up, those need to be accessible. And to be sure, lots of people who love philosophy are willing to read primary sources for the golden nuggets, and heaven knows the golden nuggets are there. But I like, all of my writing is meant to be an invitation to people to find meaning in their lives. And as you know, in this distracted age, you really only have a microsecond to grab people's attention and to hopefully flip some switch in them that reminds them of the transitory nature of life, and that you really want to get serious about what you're doing on this short ride that you have. And by serious, I don't mean grim, but we waste a lot of time.
Mm.
It's the easiest thing to do is to waste our lives, drip by drip, moment by moment, not in big grand swaths. So, forgive me, I digress, but I suppose I do have something of a mission to get people to stop and think about who they want to be and to take their lives seriously enough to know that what we say and do and think and what we refrain from doing and saying and thinking, it really matters. It really counts. We won't necessarily know uh, to whom it will matter, in the fullness of time,
Mm.
but I just take it on wild faith that what we do matters. So anyway, in everything I do, whether it's playing music or writing, I'm I'm trying to implicitly say, "Hey, this is it. Come on."
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And, I want to get back into some of that uh, throughout the interview, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned music there. I do want to start this interview by asking about that because it's something that most people might not know about you, is that you do have that background as a musician and a performer. And so we have that kind of background, as we share that background there. And so I'd love to talk about that. I mean, you play an instrument that I have never heard of before until I started researching more about you, which is the hammer dulcimer, and people can look it up. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you chose that instrument, and maybe about what music has meant to you throughout your life.
Definitely. Well, first of all, I should say that always as a kind of shorthand, when people ask me, "What do you play?" I say a hammer dulcimer
Mm-hmm.
because although a lot of people don't know what that is, a few people do.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm really misleading people because what I actually play is a one of a kind thing that
Mm-hmm.
I had made for me by a wonderful luthier who lives in West Virginia, United States. And it's based on the hammer dulcimer, but it also has elements of the Eastern European cymbalum or the Persian santur, the Chinese yangqing. I could go
Mm-hmm.
on and on. Anyway, the thing that I play is this ginormous trapezoidal shaped 106 stringed instrument that I hit with mallets. And
Wow.
why do I play it? I never planned to be a musician, never had such aspirations. But way back in the day, when I guess I was 19 or 20, something like that, and I was working kind of a scut job, just getting by, and it wasn't a terrific time in my life. And one day, actually, the work that I did was I was a food service worker, and
Mm-hmm.
I was replacing ketchups and mustards, condiments at the condiment bar. And while I was doing that, a guy happened to come into the dining hall where I was working, and he set up an instrument which I now know to be a hammer dulcimer, and he started playing it. And I, I, I just was so struck by the the tenderness of this sound. I mean, I didn't have words for it in those days. It was just one of those instant things where that's for me. Gonna
Mm.
get me one of those things, and not knowing why. I suppose some people of a more spiritual bent would say it was a calling or whatever, but I don't typically have such experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyway, long story short is I got a hammer dulcimer made for me, but then I became a monster. I loved playing this thing, and eventually I started to started to adapt the design. And I play this all over the place, often in what some people would call sacred spaces, churches, synagogues, mosques, and so on. Uh, and usually at, I guess what you call life cycle
Mm-hmm.
events, anniversaries, celebrations, weddings, funerals, everything. And it just, I like to think it does the same thing that my writing does, which is it just pierces. A lot of time when I play, just people will start spontaneously crying, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
just say, I don't know why I'm crying. They're very apologetic. And I like to think that they're feeling something of the wonder that was my initial impetus for following it. It's the reason you haven't heard of the thing or of my particular thing is 106 strings. They're all waiting to go out of a tune.
Mm-hmm.
So you either really have to be a total nut to play this thing or very disciplined. And I would put myself with the total nut.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous sound.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
I would love if you had any sort of video of you playing or any sort of thing that we can listen to or even get a visual of what this instrument looks like. I'd love to put that in the show notes so that people can see that.
I'll send it. I'd love to.
Yeah, awesome.
I'd that means a lot to me because I really live this kind of split
Mm-hmm.
life. And I've often, in my musical work, I don't talk about writing because it's confusing to people. You know
Mm-hmm.
how it is, Simon. People want to think of you in a, you know, simply,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
No, well, I just think it'd be really interesting for people, and I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying there about people feeling these emotions that they don't really expect or they don't really
you still
know.
there, Simon? I lost your voice.
Oh, you lost my voice for a second?
Yeah, just for a couple of seconds.
Okay. Well, it seems like it's back anyway, hopefully. Uh,
Yes.
I was just saying, I agree with what you're saying there about, people feeling these emotions that they don't really understand while they hear these instruments or they hear a particular tune. I mean, in my own life with performing, I've always thought that it's my goal to make the people in the audience feel something that they didn't really know they were going to feel when they came into the club or into the event. And people say that. For example, I was on a ship performing in a jazz club with my band, and often people would come in and they'd say, you know what, I really thought that I hated jazz. But when I
Yes.
came in here, I could sit down for hours and listen to this, and you made me feel this, and you made me feel that. People don't know that until they see something live right in front of them, and they see the emotion and the everything that's put together in a live performance. uh, I mean, this is something that we're very fortunate as musicians to experience. I think we're far more fortunate than even the people who get to hear that and feel those emotions.
Amen.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yes. Yes to all of it. Yes.
Well, why don't we move from music into something that obviously is going to be a broader topic for my audience, which is Stoicism. Now, obviously, Stoicism has played a large role in your life, and I'd love to know, when were you first introduced to the Stoics, and why do you think that this philosophy stuck with you?
Okay. Well, let's see. Let me try to figure how far back to go. When I was a kid, I lived across the street from a philosophy professor from India, a
Mm-hmm.
man named Narayan Champawat. And he seemed very exotic to me, and he owned more books than anyone I had ever met.
Mm.
Anyhow, when I was playing with his kids one time, I, I said, Mr. Champawat, what's philosophy? All the other moms and dads on the block just they go to work with briefcases and you know, what do you philosophize? What do you do? And he said in his very, very heavily accented English, "Oh, uh, philosophy is the love of wisdom, and it begins with wonder. And
Hmm.
I thought, wonder. Yes, yes, wonder. So he says, "Would you like to read some books?" And sure. So he gave me a whole bunch of books to read, and I ended up just being kind of I don't know, sort of a kid autodidact. And so I read existentialists and this and that and the other, and he was kind of my philosophy lending
Hmm.
library. But I came across, I guess when I must have been, on the ed, an older teenager. I came across Marcus, and then through Marcus, Epictetus, and I, I, I was very excited about Stoicism because, well, I came of age in, during the Summer of Love generation and
Hmm.
all of that. And I was never at ease with it. I mean, I love the music and, that sense of freedom. I love rebellion. But it, even though I didn't have the words for it in those days, it felt uh, just too unbridled. And, like there was I guess I was just afraid, a fearful person. I just felt like, if you just kind of let your feelings be your compass in life, I guess what I was seeing is a lot of the hurt that was happening to
Hmm.
people then that wasn't talked about because we were all supposed to be loving each other and all you need is love and so forth. But there was a kind of, just a lack of, uh, nobody was looking at things through a moral lens.
Hmm.
And so I was attracted to the Stoics because they put ethics front and center, but in a non authoritarian or sanctimonious way. I
Hmm.
think, I'm just starting to name it, now as we talk, but that was the attraction. um, there wasn't like this rigid, the Ten Commandments or
Hmm.
I mean, it's not that you can't be practicing this or that and also profit from Stoic wisdom, but I like that just over and over across all the canonical texts. It's saying, think for yourself, but always think in terms of, what is worthy, what is unworthy. To me, that's much more interesting than what do I feel right now. And I don't mean to derogate feelings. I mean, obviously, like you as a musicians, feelings are fabulous, but it's a question of what you do with them and the
Hmm.
place they they occupy in your life.
Hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think, uh, if I could even interpret some of what you're saying through my own lens, Stoicism is kind of a way to find the discipline that you need to have that freedom in life that so many people want. Uh, People think that freedom is the lack of discipline or the lack of boundaries and everything, but Stoicism says, well, if you seek virtue, if you seek hard things, things that are going to challenge you and make you a stronger person, then you will have that true freedom that very few people have. So yeah, it's not wanting to just go around and be crazy and let every one of your desires be free, and it's about uh, for me anyway, it's about kind of taming that and saying, well, yes, you do need discipline. You need to practice being the best possible version of yourself and making the best possible decisions. But I love your answer there. I agree wholeheartedly. Uh, and so now we move to Epictetus, because obviously Epictetus had an impact on your life in such a way that led you to want to translate his works. Uh, and so why did you choose Epictetus? And for those people in the listening audience who don't know about The Art of Living, which is your translation of his writings, you chose particular fragments from his discourses to translate into sort of a modern English. Why did you choose those particular sections? So I guess, yeah, it's a two-part question. Why Epictetus, and why those sections?
Okay. Well, first of all, Epictetus. I I was most attracted to him because of all the Stoics. I I liked who he was. I liked that he was a lame, he had a lame leg, uh, former slave, and he wasn't a big shot. He was a relatable everyman. Now we have to put an asterisk next to the man there, because I know a lot of people have asked me, well, he's not every man. He's, what about women?
Mhm.
That's a whole other set of questions we could go into.
Absolutely.
But I liked him because he seemed a regular guy. He wasn't a big shot like Cicero or Seneca, and I guess also in a way, so I came to him I first started really, really seriously reading him in I want to say the early 90s, if memory serves.
Hmm.
And nobody knew who he was. People had heard of Marcus Aurelius, people had heard of Seneca et al. No one, and so I don't know, it just kind of appealed to the little rebel in me, like, you guys, or I don't know if I'm putting, you guys should hear about this guy and
Uh-huh.
at least learn how to pronounce his name.
Hmm.
I remember one time I was actually interviewed by the New York Times when my book first came out, and they called him Epictetus, no one had heard of him,
Hmm.
and now it's like in some circles he's a rock star.
Mm.
So yeah, I found him relatable. As to how I structured my interpretation, and I should say it's an interpretation, not a translation. I do not read Greek. I I, it, I read many different translations
Hmm.
and synthesized and cherry picked those.
Okay.
Um, but how I picked the particular topics was I I took his Enchiridion, his handbook, which is kind of his his cliff notes of his broader teachings that were transcribed by his student Arian, and they were called the discourses.
Hmm.
And I figured, well, let's first start with what were considered sort of the greatest hits. And I went progressively through. I tried to be faithful to the progression of his ideas in the Enchiridion, though I will confess I certainly left some ideas that I thought really couldn't be faithfully expressed in a modern way without
Mm.
sacrificing their true meaning.
Hmm.
I left those out. Um, and again, that's where scholars would want to quibble with me. But I never aspired to do something scholarly. I
Hmm.
aspired something that could make a real difference in regular people's lives.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that, and I think that's a really worthy cause to try and focus on how is this going to have an impact on people's lives, not how can we kind of keep this from people, yeah, how can we keep this for the elite or only the people who, you said at the start you're a popularizer, and I absolutely love that. And I'd like to get into that because that's one of my favorite parts about this book is that it is so easy to understand. And with all of my clients who I coach, because I do Stoic mindset coaching, every single
Oh,
one of them I
fantastic.
say, please, please get this book, because it will allow you to immediately find something that will help you with your current problem, no matter what it is. You can go to the contents, you can find a passage, go straight to it, read through it, you'll understand it immediately. And I mean, even with my podcast, that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to make it not about getting into, deep philosophical discussions about what certain passages mean, or getting into semantics and everything like that. But I've tried to make it about every episode. How can Stoicism change your life right now? And when I first started the podcast, I'll share this with everyone. I don't know if I've shared it on the podcast before, but when I first came out with my very first episode, I got an email almost instantaneously. It was hilarious. The first email that I got, and it's pretty much the only bad feedback that I've got from the podcast the entire time, but it was a person saying, how dare you make Stoicism seem as if it's some sort of self-help, modern thing that is just for helping people, or you're making it seem like it's too easy to implement into your life. And are you a preacher of the what is it, this modern self-help personal development movement? And it was so surprising to me. He was so angry that I would make Stoicism seem accessible and not simple, but there are very many principles in Stoicism that you can use right now that can allow you to have peace and effectiveness, and so it was surprising to me. But I mean, based on the response so far with the podcast, people really want that. They want something that can allow them to understand Stoicism in a way that gets them doing it today, right now. And so maybe I'd like to talk about this, like, how do you think that we as a Stoic community can do more to make this philosophy more accessible to people? And how can we encourage a bigger audience to come on board with it?
Oh gosh, that's a really interesting question.
It's a tough one, I'm sorry.
No, the best ones are. Well, as far as the first part of your question, how can, forgive me, I can only paraphrase it, but, how can we, kind of spread it around? Is that, just my knee-jerk response to that was really by being examples in our own lives, by being our own best selves, and not in order to seek emulators, but and this is the rejoinder I would have given to the person who was all worked up, who wrote you that first email. I would say, if ideas don't change how we relate to one another and to ourselves, then what value do they have besides just being sort of verbal pirouettes? So, forgive me, I'm drifting a little bit from your question, but I do think the most important thing we can do anytime, but I would say in these especially dire times, where truth has become so wiggly, and, of course, that's an allusion to my country's current administration. It's, good old Gandhi, we need to be the change. And, whether people then respond to us, qua Stoics or not, it's kind of, it doesn't matter. I mean, to me, because, well, I mean, I guess for myself, I always get a little nervous around isms, and who's in the club, and who's doing it right and who's not, because I'm just interested in those good ideas that make a difference. And I get really scared when people say idolize a certain person, and want to decide that all of their writings are right,
Mm-hmm.
especially because they're dead, or,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's always easy to be right when you're dead. um, oh, forgive me, Simon. I'm drifting from the point. Anyway, so be the change. And then as far as getting the ideas out, um, gosh, well, it seems like you're doing it. And maybe people like yourselves, podcasts, social media. I'll have to think about that some more.
No, that's fine, and I think your answer is absolutely awesome, and I want to echo what you're saying about you said earlier, is it useful? Is this idea useful? And focusing on these just good ideas as opposed to who's in the club and who's not. Uh, I have to share this example, and I want to be extremely respectful of the person who emailed me this. Obviously, I wouldn't want. I want people to email me, and they do email me all the time with questions. And this was one of the times where I got the okay. I'm not doing a good job of telling this story, but the email was basically a question about uh, should we call ourselves Stoics or should we not? Because we can act stoically, but can you really be a Stoic? And I really appreciate when people ask these kinds of questions because it means that they're thinking about Stoicism. It means that they're actually trying to use it in their lives, and they're not just sitting there just reading the books. They're actually thinking about things. And so I really, really love that they emailed this. However, I had to kind of email back and say, well, isn't the more important question, does it really matter if people call themselves Stoics or not? Isn't the more important question is like, look, call yourself a Stoic or not, but is the philosophy actually changing your life, making you better?
Yeah.
To me, I don't care if somebody calls themselves a Stoic or not. I personally do, because I really identify with so many levels of the philosophy. It's the philosophy that I choose to follow, and not in a way of like I will do everything that it says, but it is the guiding principles of my life.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter to me, or I don't think it even matters to anybody if somebody calls themselves a Stoic or not. What matters is this helping them right now? And I sometimes feel like we have to ask that question a lot because too many people get bogged down in these ideas that really have no impact on our life aside from having this discussion right now and figuring out the answer to this question. But once you've figured out, should we call ourselves Stoics or not? What? How does it improve anything? So I really love what you said there about is it useful? Is it not? That's what we should be focusing on. And I wanted to move to something that I really wanted to talk about this in the podcast because I have so many incredible women within my Stoic community. I coach some amazing women, and I'm becoming close to them, and I absolutely love these amazing women who are doing great things in the world. And I know that so many of the women in my community can seem to them like the philosophical arena is kind of dominated by men, and
Oh, yeah.
that's how it has been, and how it still might be the case that's just how it is. But what would you say to the women who are studying Stoicism and using it in their life, and how can we encourage more to do so?
It's a big question.
It is.
It's a whole bunch of questions. Let's see. Let me grab the tiger by the tail. Where can I begin? Well, first of all, we know that uh, the what you can think of as being the canonical texts of Stoicism are written by men about male experience for male readers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's obviously inbuilt limitations to that, not just for women, but for men,
Mm-hmm.
because, of course, as soon as you eliminate the perspective of, whatever it is, 51% of the population, then you're really not stating universal truths. You're
Mm-hmm.
stating uh, truths that are informed by certain experiences that don't embrace the whole. That said, we got to start someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I guess I've said it before in our talk, but is something a good idea? That's what interests me. And what do we do about that? Do we say, as a woman, do I, um, in my writing, in my living, um, I can extend the ideas, say, of Epictetus or Stoics, or for that matter, people who are identified, luminaries who are connected with other wisdom traditions, and bring my own, very embodied female experience to that. I think Stoicism and everything profits from adding women's voices, especially, I mean, just because I think we have a completely different ontology. I mean, we live on periodic time, uh, which males do not. And we always have that possibility of being child bearers and child nurturers. The metaphors that come naturally to women are not war metaphors or
Mm.
sport metaphors, which are just riddled, and or I should say that philosophical literature, all of literature
Hmm.
actually, that is dominated by men, see the world, or I should say, portray the world in in somewhat adversarial terms, not inevitably and not all the time, but women got to write. We've got to say how we see the world, and we shouldn't be afraid of embracing and embodying good ideas regardless of the source. Is
Mm.
that abuse? I'm still trying to figure this out myself,
No, I think.
because I get tired of men, 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 men. I mean, I remember sitting in philosophy classes and being the only woman, and it was really lousy. I
Mhm.
mean, not out of a sense of loneliness, but there was. I just wanted to stand up and say, you guys are really missing a lot.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway,
No, I love that, and I think there were two massive takeaways that I got from your answer there. Firstly, I mean, extending the ideas of Stoicism. I think that is so incredibly important. I've talked about this with many people, including Kai Whiting, a academic who I had on the podcast, and it's so important that we recognize that Stoicism isn't just this stagnant philosophy. Like, it should be moving into a modern time. It should be adapting, like any philosophy or religion, anything that there are some really good ideas, but there are also some bad ideas. Of course,
yeah,
there will be. So let's add to Stoicism as much as we possibly can, because if you just use the core values of Stoicism, there are many great ideas that you can add. I mean, there are many things that I talk about on the podcast where you might not necessarily find a lot of reference to those ideas in Stoicism, but the Stoics would probably agree with what I'm saying. Uh, and also you mentioned looking for the ideas, not shutting down the philosophy because of the source. Uh, and I think that's so important too, because I think so many people uh, would look at certain philosophies and say, well, even if we look at the Bible, many people would say, well, look at the genocides in the Bible, or look at what they say about homosexuality, or look at what they say about this. There's nothing that I can learn from this book because of those passages. And that is a mistake. That's a mistake in your philosophy of education, like on how you educate yourself, how you move forward in life, because there are so many incredible things that you can learn from the Bible that can completely transform your life. And to dismiss the entire source because of a few, uh, you know, results of the time, uh,
yes.
it's an incorrect way to live your life. I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, but um,
No, I couldn't agree more. Ideas don't have a sex or a
Hmm.
gender.
Yeah.
At their root, they don't.
Mm.
And
I love that.
yeah.
That's the quote of the episode right there. Ideas don't have a sex or gender. I love that. It's so true. And I only had a couple more questions for you, and I want to be respectful of your time. But this one, you might have already talked about this a little bit with the philosopher who you lived next to when you were a child. But I was thinking Epictetus has obviously had a big impact on your life. And maybe I'd like to know, could you tell us about someone else, maybe not from a book or not a Stoic, who has had an equally huge impact on your life, and tell us why they had that kind of impact?
Yes. I've I've gotten many. I'm lucky to say I've gotten many letters from readers over the years,
Mm-hmm.
and the book has been around over 20 years. So I've heard from people from all different walks of life, from all around the world. The book is translated into many, many languages.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the most moving examples of people I have heard from whose lives were changed were soldiers from the war in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Mm.
For whatever reason, I've heard from quite a number of these. They were all men who wrote to me, but one in particular, I shouldn't say his name to protect his privacy, but he was on the brink of suicide
Mm-hmm.
when he was on a mission in Iraq. What he had seen while he was there, in his words, he said it just all but destroyed him and made him really lose hope in any kind of a future for himself or humanity, because all he saw was ugliness and pain and destruction, and he couldn't reconcile being part of that
Mm.
himself. Anyway, he told me that someone in his unit saw that he wasn't looking so great, and they said, "Hey, take a look at this book." And I don't know how it got there, but for some reason he had a copy of The Art of Living. And for reasons I honestly don't know, but the book, according to him, pulled him back from the brink and made him want to somehow turn what he considered to be the worst experience into something that could be valuable to
Mm.
other. I guess, in other words, he saw that his life could be of use to others because of his unique experience. And he's written to me a few times over the years, and he actually sounds like a very, very happy person. Now, I'm not taking credit
Mm-hmm.
personally for this, but evidently, reading the book was a kind of pivot point for him,
Mm.
and the beginning of despite everything, wanting to summon the good, or to somehow walk toward the good, not even knowing what that would look like.
Mm.
Having it be more of a direction than even an imagined destination.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and I really appreciate you sharing that story with myself and the whole audience. I did have a couple more questions, but after that answer, I feel like that's a really great place to finish the episode, because I mean, it just speaks volumes not only about your work but also about the philosophy in general and its power to impact people's lives. Uh, and I think this is the perfect place to say goodbye. And before we do, obviously people can buy your books on Amazon and all sorts of stores, and I'll put the links there so that they can do that.
Okay.
But if somebody wanted to follow your thoughts, I don't know how active you are online, but is there anywhere that people can go to follow you or see what you're up to?
I am actually finally about to put up a website because I think I told you I'm really shy and kind of value privacy. But I can be found on Facebook, and if
Cool.
people want to contact me, just at Sharon Lebell on Facebook, I'd be glad to
Awesome.
be in touch if people have questions about anything.
Great. Well, I really appreciate that. And I don't know if you know, but we also have a Facebook group uh, where I mean, I think it's around 800 members now, of all these people trying to, really use Stoicism in their lives. But I know you're a member of other groups. Actually, funny story. I was going through. Are you a member of the Stoicism group on Facebook? The one with like 40,000 members. Uh,
I'm a member of something.
yeah. I just remember going through the comments one day, and it was something about feminism, and I just remember seeing one comment from you that was like something like "You go, girl," and that was that was all that you said in the whole thing, and I was like, what a champion. You don't look, you're on Facebook and you're in the crowd, but you're not of the crowd, you're not arguing, you're not you just little comment. I love that. I think that's completely admirable. But you're more than welcome to join the group, and I'm sure people would have questions for you there as well, and we'd love to see you there. But I just want to thank you again so much for doing this interview. I would love to have you back another time so that we can get into even more questions and find out even more about your life, because it's just been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much.
Oh, likewise. Really nice to meet you, Simon. Thank you for everything. This was a nice talk. Yeah, be in touch anytime.
Will do. Absolutely. All right, so there you have it, my interview with Sharon Lebell. I really hope that you guys enjoyed that as much as I did, and I hope that you can take away a lot of value from what Sharon was saying in all of those answers. Once again, if you guys have any sort of recommendations for people who'd like to hear on the podcast, I'm always open to hearing those recommendations and trying my best to get people on the show. And also, I will be putting the links in the show notes there to where you can buy Sharon's book, The Art of Living, which I highly recommend that everybody gets because it's just such a valuable resource. And on top of that, I don't know if there's anything else that I can share with you other than I hope that your week has been going amazing, and I hope that you enjoyed the episode, and I'll talk to you next time. But until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope it's been valuable for you. And if you'd like to support the show, then you can go to patreon.com/Simon Drew. If you'd like to try mindset coaching with me, then you can book your first free consultation by going to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching. To join the community, just go to Facebook and search for the Practical Stoic Mastermind. The links to all of these places are included in the show notes, but for now, this is Simon Drew signing out.